Rain splattered against the windshield as James Alder leaned back in his leather seat, barely listening to the soft hum of his driver's voice. The city lights blurred through the rain, casting streaks of color across the glass. It had been another long evening of negotiations and catered dinners, his life a constant blur of meetings, mergers, and multi-million-dollar decisions. As the car approached a red light near a quiet corner of downtown, James glanced out the window. Something caught his eye, a still shape huddled on a bus stop bench, nearly hidden beneath a damp hoodie. He frowned. "Stop the car," he said suddenly. The driver hesitated, then pulled over. James stepped out into the cold drizzle, the rain instantly soaking through his tailored coat. As he approached the bench, he saw her, no older than 7, curled up like a kitten, trying to stay warm. Her shoes were too small, her fingers wrapped tightly around a tattered backpack. But it was the cardboard sign beside her that stopped his breath. "Mom's gone. Please don't take me away." James stared at the words, then back at the girl. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and frightened. She pulled her hood tighter, expecting to be told to leave, to be ignored, or worse. But James didn't speak. Not right away. He simply stood there, unsure for once in his life what to do. All his wealth, his influence, none of it had prepared him for this moment. And yet, something deep inside him stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. The city skyline shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of James Alder's penthouse, but he barely noticed. The silence was deafening. He stood by the glass, still in his rain-damp clothes, staring out at nothing. Sleep had eluded him, chased away by the image of that little girl curled up alone on a bench in the cold. Her eyes, wide, guarded, and impossibly tired, haunted him. He had offered her food, even a blanket from the car, but she had refused with a quick shake of her head, clutching her bag as if it were all she had left in the world. James sank into his armchair, hands clasped, his thoughts tangled. For decades, he had been defined by numbers, bottom lines, and stock prices. He had built empires, moved markets. But that night, none of it mattered. How had he become so disconnected, so blind to what really needed changing? He remembered her sign again, "Mom's gone. Please don't take me away." The word stabbed at him. Not a plea for food or money, just the desperate wish to not be taken, to stay invisible. 1,000 what-ifs ran through his mind. What if he had looked away like everyone else? What if she disappeared before morning? James stood suddenly, filled with a resolve he couldn't explain. He checked the time. Nearly 5 a.m. There was only one thing he knew for sure, he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen her. Not now. The sky was still dark when James returned to the bus stop, the early morning air crisp and quiet. The city hadn't fully woken yet, just the distant rumble of a street cleaner and the occasional car rolling by. In his hands, he carried a bag of warm breakfast and a soft fleece blanket. He wore jeans and an old hoodie this time, nothing that screamed power or wealth. He didn't want to scare her. He just wanted her to see him. As he approached the bench, he saw her again, curled up in the same position, knees to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around that fraying backpack. She looked even smaller in the early light. Her eyes flickered open when she heard his footsteps. For a second, they locked eyes, hers cautious, his steady. He knelt down slowly, keeping his distance. "Hey," he said softly, holding out the bag. "I brought you some breakfast. Pancakes and hot chocolate." She didn't move. Didn't speak. "My name's James," he continued. "I don't work for anyone. I'm not here to take you away." A long pause. "But I saw you yesterday. And I can't stop thinking about you." Still, no response. Just quiet breathing. "I have a place you can rest. No questions, no police. Just safety. Just food, and warmth. And someone who cares." He reached out his hand, open and still. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, hesitantly, like a leaf caught in the wind, her small fingers reached forward and touched his. He smiled. "Come with me." 1 month later, the rhythm of James Alder's life had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The boardroom, once his sanctuary of control and command, now felt foreign. He had delegated most of his responsibilities, showing up only when necessary, always leaving early. His office desk, once covered in deal memos and investor reports, now held crayon drawings and a half-finished children's book. Lila, that was her name, was living in a guest room at his home. It had started with just food and shelter, but quickly became more. He enrolled her in a small private school where she could catch up gently, with counseling support and teachers who understood trauma. Every day, he dropped her off himself, standing awkwardly at the gates, then waiting in the car long after she disappeared into the building, just to be sure she was safe. His board grew restless. In a meeting filled with sharp suits and sharper questions, one executive finally asked, "Why are we risking millions in delays for one child you barely know?" James didn't hesitate. "Because what we do, what I do, means nothing if I can't stop for someone who has no one." That silenced the room. Later that night, Lila handed him a picture she'd drawn, the two of them under a tree, holding hands, with the words, "Me and Mr. James," written in big letters at the top. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a business deal. But it was the most important agreement he'd ever made. The gymnasium was buzzing with applause, proud parents waving phones and cameras as students in navy blue robes crossed the stage. Balloons floated near the ceiling, and the smell of flowers and folding chairs filled the air. In the middle of it all, James Alder sat quietly in the front row, hands folded, eyes shining. His suit was simple. His tie, slightly crooked. But his heart had never been fuller. Lila's name was called, and the crowd clapped politely, until they saw her. Confident, calm, with a grace that belied the years she had once spent invisible. She stepped up to the microphone, a little nervous, holding a folded sheet of paper in her trembling hands. "My story doesn't start like most," she began. "I used to think being seen was dangerous. That if people noticed me, I'd lose even more than I already had. But then one night, someone did see me. And instead of walking away, he stopped." She glanced down at James, who was already wiping his eyes. "He said 3 words I'll never forget, 'Come with me.' And he meant it. He didn't just rescue me. He stood by me. Learned how to love someone who didn't know how to be loved yet." The room was silent, hearts held in quiet awe. "Mr. James didn't just change my life. He gave me one." The audience rose in a standing ovation. James smiled, tears in his eyes, knowing this moment wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning.